You ever have one of those moments where your entire life changes in a single second? Where you realize that everything you thought was going one direction suddenly pivots, and you're left standing there wondering if what just happened was the worst thing or the best thing that could have possibly occurred? That's my story. And I'm about to tell you how a mistake, a stupid, careless, life-altering mistake, became the catalyst for everything I ever wanted. But here's the thing. It didn't happen the way I expected. Not even close. Before we dive into this, I need you to really pay attention because there's a twist you won't see coming. So please, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications because what happens next is something I never thought would be possible. Let's begin. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is who I was. I was invisible, and I didn't even realize it at first. I woke up every morning at 5:30, showered in water that was never quite hot enough, and put on the same kind of professional outfit I'd worn for the past 3 years. Black blazer, neutral blouse, sensible heels that made my feet ache by 3 in the afternoon. I'd drive to the office, park in the same spot, take the same elevator, and sit at the same desk. An executive assistant at one of the most prestigious hotel management companies in the country. Sounds impressive, right? That's what I told my family. That's what I told myself. But the truth was different. I was the person who made everyone else look good. I was the one who researched the market trends, compiled the data, wrote the strategic proposals, and organized every detail of every presentation. And then I watched someone else, usually my supervisor, walk into a boardroom and present my work as their own. I'd sit outside the conference room, refreshing spreadsheets, while my ideas were being discussed by people who had no idea where they came from. I'd hear them get praised, and I'd feel this hollow ache in my chest. Not anger, not at first, just emptiness. The salary barely covered my rent in a city where rent was astronomical. I had student loans that felt like anchors, pulling me deeper into debt every month. I had dreams, sure. Everyone has dreams. But mine felt farther away every single day. I wanted to be seen. I wanted my work to matter. I wanted someone to look at me and recognize that I was capable of more than just taking notes and scheduling meetings. But nobody did. I was background music in everyone else's success story. There was one person, though, one person who made that hollow ache slightly more bearable. His name was impossible to ignore because it was written on the building. On the company letterhead, on every contract and legal document. He was the owner, the billionaire, the self-made man who'd built this empire from nothing. I'd never spoken to him. I'd seen him maybe 3 times in 2 years, and each time it was from a distance. He'd walk through the office like a ghost, and everyone would suddenly sit up straighter. His presence was cold, professional, distant. But there was something else there too, something I couldn't quite name. I know how this sounds. I know exactly how it sounds. A woman with nothing, fantasizing about a man with everything. A cliché wrapped in desperation. But that's not what it was. It wasn't about him being rich or powerful. It was about him being proof that invisibility didn't have to be permanent. He'd been invisible once. I could feel it. You don't build an empire like his without understanding what it feels like to be overlooked. So I created this version of him in my mind. Not the cold businessman I saw walking through hallways, but the person I imagined he could be. The person who would understand what it felt like to be me. It sounds crazy when I say it out loud, and it was. But it got me through the difficult days. On nights when I was exhausted from working 12 hours, when my supervisor had taken credit for an entire quarter of my work, I'd go home and imagine a conversation with him. Not a romantic conversation, just understanding. Someone who saw me. Someone who knew what I was capable of. It was the only dream I had left that felt safe. And then it happened. We had a massive project, the biggest one I'd worked on in years. A complete restructuring proposal for 3 new hotel locations. I researched every detail. I analyzed competitor data. I wrote the strategy from beginning to end. I created the presentation deck. I did the math that would determine millions of dollars in revenue. Every single crucial element came from my mind, my computer, my late nights, and my weekend sacrifices. My supervisor, Daniel, watched me do all of it. He knew. He absolutely knew that this was my work. But when the time came to present to the investors and the owner, he walked into that boardroom and made it his. And the owner, the man I'd built up in my imagination to be different, just listened and nodded. He congratulated Daniel. He approved the proposal. He even mentioned how impressed he was by the strategic thinking. I watched from my desk, and something inside me broke. Not dramatically. There was no crying in the bathroom or angry outburst. It was quieter than that. It was the moment I realized that even my fantasy wasn't going to save me, because the person I'd imagined didn't actually exist. That night, I sat in my apartment with a bottle of wine I couldn't really afford, and I just fell apart. Not in a physical way. More like I was disappearing. Like everything I'd done, everything I'd sacrificed, everything I believed I could be. It all didn't matter. Nobody saw it. Nobody would ever see it. I'd be that invisible woman for the rest of my life, and there was nothing I could do to change it. My best friend called me. She always knew when something was wrong without me having to say anything. She listened to me vent about Daniel, about the unfairness of it all, about how hopeless everything felt. And then she said something that seemed simple at the time. You should write about it. Write down everything you're feeling. Sometimes it helps to get it out of your system. I told her it wouldn't change anything. She said it wasn't about changing things. It was about surviving them. So I opened my phone. I opened the memo app, and I started writing. Not a professional email, not a complaint to HR. I wrote a letter, a real letter. I wrote about the unfairness of watching someone else take credit for my work. I wrote about the exhaustion of being invisible. I wrote about how tired I was of waiting for someone to notice me, to believe in me, to give me a chance. And somewhere in there, my pen, or my fingers on that keyboard, started writing about him. About the version of him I'd created, about how he represented everything I wanted to believe was possible. I wrote about his intelligence, his determination, the way he carried himself with absolute certainty. I wrote about imagining what it would be like to have someone like that see me, not romantically. I wasn't naive, but just see me, acknowledge that I existed, that I mattered, that my work meant something. The letter was vulnerable and raw and honest in a way I'd never been with anyone. It was part confession, part dream, part desperate cry for help. It was beautiful and pathetic and completely, totally honest. And then I saved it as a draft and closed my phone. I never intended to send it. It was catharsis. It was therapy. It was the only way I knew how to survive that night without completely shattering into pieces. The next morning, I was running late. I'd overslept because I'd finally been able to sleep, and my alarm didn't go off. I was rushing, throwing on clothes, grabbing coffee, trying to make up time. I was sitting in my car at a red light when I realized I needed to send the owner an email about a scheduling conflict. Just a simple professional email. I opened my email app and started typing. My hands were on autopilot because my brain was still groggy with sleep and caffeine withdrawal. I needed to update my email signature because I'd changed my phone number the week before. I opened my memo app to copy the new signature I'd drafted, but in my half-awake state, I copied the wrong thing. I copied the letter, the entire, unfiltered, vulnerable, deeply personal letter. I pasted it into my email. I added one line, quick scheduling note regarding the investor meeting, and then, without reading it through, I hit send. I was already on the highway when it hit me. The realization crashed over me like ice water. My stomach dropped. My hands went numb on the steering wheel. I pulled over immediately and opened my email to see what I'd actually sent. And there it was, the entire letter. The confession, the fantasy, the desperate plea for acknowledgement. All of it, sent directly to him. The one person I'd been so careful to keep it hidden from. The one person who would now know exactly how broken I was. I sat in my car on the side of the highway for 20 minutes, hyperventilating. I tried to unsend it. The email app has an unsend feature, but only for a few seconds. It was too late. Way too late. He'd already received it. He'd already read it. I could picture him opening his email, seeing my words, and just judging me, pitying me, or worse, laughing at me. I was about to lose my job. I was about to become the woman who sent a love letter to her boss, the woman who was so desperate for attention that she couldn't even separate fantasy from professional communication. I got to the office 45 minutes late, and I spent every second of that day waiting for a summons to HR. I couldn't focus on anything. I kept checking my email, expecting a termination notice. I avoided every hallway where he might appear. I ate lunch at my desk instead of the break room so I wouldn't run into anyone. I was living in a state of suspended panic that made everything feel unreal. 3 days went by. 3 days of absolute torture. No meeting, no call, no response at all. The silence was somehow worse than any confrontation would have been. My mind kept creating scenarios, nightmarish scenarios where this email became the office joke, where people talked about the desperate assistant who'd developed feelings for the owner, where I became a cautionary tale. I almost told my best friend. I picked up my phone at least 20 times with her name at the top, but shame kept my mouth closed. She'd told me to write it out, but she hadn't meant to actually send it to him. That was on me. That was my failure. On the 7th day after I sent the letter, I got an email. My heart stopped when I saw his name in my inbox, but it wasn't a termination notice. It was a request. He wanted to see me in his office. Today, immediately. I've never been more terrified of anything in my life. I took the elevator to the top floor, the executive offices. I'd been there before for administrative purposes, but it felt different this time. Everything felt sharper. Scarier. I walked past his assistant and straight to his office door. I knocked, and his voice said, "Come in." He was sitting at his desk. Everything in his office was expensive and cold and perfectly arranged. He didn't look angry. That was the strange part. I would have preferred anger. Anger would have made sense. But he looked thoughtful, like he was studying me, trying to figure something out. He told me to sit down. I sat down. My hands were shaking, and I put them in my lap to hide it. He said, "I read your email." Just like that. Simple. Direct. I opened my mouth to apologize, but he held up a hand. He said, "Before you say anything, I need to ask you something. Why do you think I hired you?" I was confused. I wasn't hired by him. I was hired by the department manager 3 years ago. I said that, and he smiled slightly. A real smile, not cold at all. He said, "I own this company. I know every person who works here. Everyone. I make it my business to know. And I've known about you for a long time." My stomach dropped again, but this time for a different reason. He continued. He said he'd noticed me when I was still new. He'd seen the quality of the presentations, the depth of the research, the strategic thinking. He'd watched my work for months. He knew that Daniel was taking credit for what I was doing, and he knew that nobody was giving me the recognition I deserved. But here's where it got strange. He said he'd deliberately kept his distance. He said the power dynamic was too imbalanced. If he'd approached me directly, if he'd shown favoritism, it would have made things complicated. He wanted to see if I would advocate for myself, if I would find the courage to demand what I was worth. And then the letter happened. He said that the email changed everything, not because of what I felt about him, but because of what it revealed about me. He said it showed him my passion, my honesty, my willingness to be vulnerable. He said that's what he'd been looking for all along. He told me about the new division he was creating, a completely separate branch of the company focused on transforming the industry from the inside out. He needed someone to lead it, someone with vision, someone who understood what it felt like to be invisible, someone who could change the system that had made them invisible in the first place. He was offering me the job. Vice President of Talent Development and Equity, triple my current salary, complete autonomy, the chance to actually make a difference. I couldn't speak. I literally couldn't form words. It felt like I was hallucinating, like I was still sitting on the side of the highway, dreaming this up because reality was too painful to face. But then he said something that brought me back to earth. He said, "I need to address something else, though. The personal part of your letter. I'm not the man you described. I want you to understand that. I'm colder than that, more complicated, more flawed. The person you wrote about doesn't exist. He's a projection of what you needed to believe in. Can you accept working with the real version of me, or would that be too disappointing?" And that's when something shifted inside me. Because he was right. I'd created a fantasy. I'd fallen in love with an idea, not a person. And sitting there in that moment, I realized something crucial. The letter wasn't really about him at all. It was about me. It was me finally speaking up about what I deserved. It was me demanding to be seen. So I told him that. I said, "I don't love you. I love who I could become if someone believed in me, and I think you're offering me that chance. So yes, I can work with the real version of you, because I'm finally working with the real version of me too." He nodded, and something like respect crossed his face. I started the new position 2 weeks later. The Tati transformation happened slowly at first. I restructured the entire hiring process to emphasize potential over credentials. I created mentorship programs. I implemented systems where credit was given where it was due. I promoted people who'd been overlooked. I hired 37 talented individuals in the first 6 months, 37 people who looked like me, who came from backgrounds like mine, who had been invisible in their previous jobs. And then karma did something interesting, something poetic. Daniel, my former supervisor, ended up reporting to me. When he realized this, he came to my office to apologize. He sat down and told me that he was just trying to get ahead, that everyone did it, that it was just office politics. I listened to him, and then I told him that I wasn't angry, not anymore, but I also wasn't going to pretend that what he did was acceptable. I created new policies for accountability and attribution, and I made it clear that in this new division, your success was measured by how you lifted others up, not by how you tore them down. Daniel quit 3 months later. He went to work for a competitor, and honestly, I didn't feel triumphant about it. I just felt relieved, because it wasn't about revenge, it was about building something better. 6 months into the position, I was presenting at an industry conference. I was talking about workplace equity and the importance of seeing people, really seeing them, for who they truly are and what they're truly capable of. The owner was in the audience, and after I finished, he came up to me and told me something I didn't expect. He said that meeting me had changed him too. He said he'd realized that he'd spent so many years building an empire that he'd forgotten why he was building it. He said watching me transform the company had reminded him that success isn't just about money or power. It's about the lives you touch, the potential you unlock in other people. He told me he was stepping back from day-to-day operations. He was creating a foundation, a fund to support women entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds. He was using his wealth and his platform to do exactly what he'd done for me, to see people, to believe in them, to give them a chance. We parted that day as friends, real friends, partners in purpose, not lovers, not saviors and damsels, just 2 people who'd found something unexpected in each other, the mirror we both needed. I moved into a new apartment. I paid off my student loans. I bought a car that started consistently on cold mornings. I started dating someone who saw me clearly and loved me fiercely, not because he thought he could save me, but because he recognized that I was already saving myself. My best friend was at every milestone. She'd believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. She was the one who told me to write the letter in the first place, never knowing that it would change everything. But here's what I know now that I didn't know then. The letter didn't change my life because I sent it to him. It changed my life because I finally admitted the truth. I admitted that I was tired of being invisible. I admitted that I deserved more. I admitted that I had value. And once I'd admitted those things, even in a moment of desperation and emotion, I couldn't go back to pretending they weren't true. The love letter was a mistake, the wrong person, the wrong time, the wrong everything. But it was also exactly what I needed to happen. Sometimes fate doesn't work the way you think it will. Sometimes the universe has to break your carefully constructed fantasy so that you can finally see reality. Sometimes you have to send the wrong email to the right person at exactly the moment you're ready to believe in yourself. I'm not invisible anymore, not because he made me visible, but because I finally looked in the mirror and saw myself. And once you see yourself, really see yourself, nobody can make you invisible again. If you're watching this and you feel invisible, I need you to hear me. Your worth doesn't come from someone else's recognition. It comes from inside you. It's always been there. Sometimes you just need the right moment to finally see it. Sometimes you need to send that email. Sometimes you need to speak the truth out loud, even if it terrifies you. Because that's the moment everything changes. That's when you become visible to yourself. And that's the only visibility that actually matters. If this story moved you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear that they're not invisible. Thank you for letting me share this with you.